If you have a skill, you can utilize that skill to grow your value, right? Your net worth. And I have a skill in design and renovation, and I've honed that skill over many, many years, and I'll continue to leverage that skill that I learned a long time ago to continue to create value.
From Wealth Creators USA, this is From Worry to Wealth, the podcast that shatters the myths and mystique surrounding wealth creation. As students, our schools and universities often neglect the crucial education on the core financial principles. I'm Ben Lyons. I'm a business owner, investor, entrepreneur, and author, and I'm joined by my business partner, Alex Fink. And together, we're here to inspire your journey towards improving your financial self. In a world buzzing with advice on the behaviors and mindset to become wealthy, we'll share proven processes tried and tested by our network of successful collaborators. So get ready to move past worry and move towards wealth and your improved financial self. Hey everyone, welcome back. I am Ben Lyons, and I am with my lovely partner. Lovely, that's probably a little feminine, right?
Lovely, I don't think it's totally feminine, but if you want me to be more feminine, I'll try for the next podcast.
I am with my studly business partner, Alex Fink.
Very masculine.
Right, masculine, you know, he's...
Yeah, Brawny.
Right, Brawny?
Yes, something.
Yeah. He was a lacrosse player when he was growing up, so he's a pretty tough guy. But anyway, I'm with Alex Fink, the Alex Fink, in another episode of From Worry to Wealth podcast, as usual. But this maybe is going to be a little bit different. We're going to talk about a specific asset that I know about, and I love this story because, you know, I think Alex showed me this asset in 2018, and you may have even said, "Hey Ben, you want in on this?" I don't know, did you? And
I don't know, I might have.
I thought maybe you did, and I think my answer was no. And we're going to learn that was really the wrong answer here today as we talk about this asset. So this specific episode is really talking about property. What do you want to call it? Heron? Is that what we're going to call it? Heron?
Absolutely. That sounds good. Let's call it Heron. I like it.
Okay. So, Alex, this is a story about an asset that you executed on, and I want to go back to the beginning, how you found it, what made you decide to buy it, everything that went into the acquisition side of this.
Yeah, so interestingly enough, this asset is up the street from another asset that I had bought 6 weeks prior to this.
Oh, okay.
And I think that's probably why I found this asset. But for the most part, a lot of the real estate assets that I invest in, and I'm sure you're the same way, I find them myself. In some cases, a realtor brings them to me or some other person brings them. But for the most part, I will be perusing the market and will find an asset that I think is good, and I'll go out and execute on the asset. So in this case, I had bought a relatively large property that we're partnered on. And that property is about 2 miles from this property, and I didn't know what I was going to do with this other property when I bought it. So, you know, I knew I was getting a great deal. I knew that I would be able to get out of it, and this property is similar to that. So bought this other property, was standing on the property, started looking up. I believe I was at that property when I got on my phone, and I wanted to see some real estate that was around that property. And this one popped up, and I thought, I really like it, you know? So it looked like a good deal, and I had been tracking. So this was around the time in Florida where...
This was when? 2018?
2018.
18, okay.
October 2018, I had, for some reason, years before this when I was looking, property values were much higher. And when I say for some reason, I'm betting it was because a couple of hurricanes rolled through and decimated some of the docks, and the waterfront living had a different stigma attached to it at this time. So these assets had devalued pretty dramatically, and the market had cooled off for these assets. Well, when that happens, I get excited, right? When bad things happen, it kind of makes me happy a little bit, right?
So you're a vulture.
Well, if the real estate market was super, super strong and everybody was out buying properties, that really wouldn't be my thing, because I'm a value buyer, and so are you. And I just think that for me, all the opportunity is in the downturn of the market, not when things are going great. So a lot of times when things are going great, people don't leverage the fundamentals. People get a little crazy. They start to take risks that are unacceptable to me. And so I generally pull back from the market when the market's really, really great. So in this case, I noticed this one asset, got the asset. In buying that asset, found this other asset. And I said, let's go take a look at it. So I went and took a look at this property, walked onto the property, and it was one of the prettiest properties I had ever seen. In fact, I think at that time, I had suggested that this was one of the most beautiful lots in the entire area, and probably one of the prettiest properties I had ever seen. So I put in an offer. Put in an offer right there that day, called the listing agent.
So what was it listed for? Do you remember?
Originally 2.7 or 2.8 million. At this time, I believe they had reduced it to about 1.6 or 1.8 million, somewhere around there. That's what it was listed for.
And your offer was what?
1 million.
1 million. And what was their reaction?
Well,
Was the house was it occupied or vacant?
the house was vacant.
Okay.
This was generational transition. So the family, the individual that owned it had passed away.
Okay.
And actually, ironically, that was kind of the same thing on the other asset that we were talking about. But so this person who passed away, their estate had the property. It was not marketed well. It was not photographed well. It actually looked like it had flooded, so it almost looked like a distressed asset. But the asset was nice. And so I got there, and not only had it not flooded, it was sitting 15 to 20 feet above the mean high water line. So the property was sitting up on a high bluff. It was over 200 feet on the water. It was actually over 240 feet on the water. It was a very, very large property. And I did some quick calculations. I thought, wait a second, this is actually so it was 3 acres on the water, 2 waterfront lots, and a dry lot. So I thought, this is 3 lots, two lots on the water. This is a slam dunk. This thing is beautiful. I can't not buy this property. I had no idea what I was going to do with it. So made the offer of $1 million. They came back at 1.4. I said, I can't do that. Anyway, we settled on 1.1 million. Okay. And at the time, interest rate environment was a little bit better than we have today, Benjamin. And I believe I was able to secure a loan when I acquired the property for 90% of the purchase price.
Wow.
With no mortgage insurance. I think it was at 4%, something like that.
Yeah.
So to get into the property, I think I paid 1.1. It was probably 150,000 of my cash to get into the property.
Okay.
So that's how I entered.
And I know that it was a big project, big house, beautiful property. What happened between 2018 and this is now 2025?
As it relates to the development of the property?
Yeah.
Yeah. So a lot of times when I acquire an asset, I don't totally know what I'm going to do with it. So I ruminate about it. I think about highest and best use, various options. So I had a few options. One, I could tear the house down, build a couple of waterfront homes and another home. At the time, I always think it's such a shame. This house was built in the 40s, had some original character. It was a really cool house. It's just so painful for me sometimes to completely eliminate the entire infrastructure that's there. So I started, probably within 6 months, started developing plans to renovate the property. I had a lot of people telling me that I was not being very smart about this because they said, you should just tear that property down. It's worthless. It's not worth anything. So I thought, well, I've got this very unique property with a lot of water frontage. And if I tear that property down and build 2 new properties on the water, while that could be pretty lucrative, it would eliminate the uniqueness of this property. It would turn it into a normal property. So I thought, how many properties do you see that are 260 feet on the water, sitting up on a high bluff? It felt better to me to expand and renovate the current house and create value in something so unique with a larger home. And so, even though everybody else told me that was probably a bad idea, I just felt better about it. So created plans, got the plans done. I've got a lot going on, so I wish I could do all these things quicker, but plans got done in 2020. I refined those plans, refined them, trying to decide what I'm going to do with the property. I actually moved in a few folks into one. There was a guest house on the property, so finished that first. So this took a long time, right? Finished that first, moved those folks in. They were living there, taking care of the property. And then I started the renovation, I think, in 2021. I renovated the property from 2021 to last year, 2024. Got a CO in mid-2024. Had been finalizing the exterior landscaping design. Hadn't quite finished it, but one of our realtors called me, a very, very good realtor who we use all the time. She had identified a purchaser through another realtor that posted something online. That purchaser said this person has a very, very large budget and they're a cash buyer. And they're looking for something private. I'm not sure exactly what the description was because I don't think I ever saw it. So she called and said, "Hey, would you like to have somebody look at this property?" I said, "Well, it's a little bit of a challenge because I haven't finished the property yet. Typically, I like to get things completely finished so I can eliminate any objections from potential buyers. But somebody in this price range likely doesn't have some of the same concerns that somebody would have in a lower price range. So one thing to consider when you're investing in assets as you go to sell is the target audience. And a $300,000 home and a $3 million home have different targets, right? People with different requirements. And so I thought, well, even though this rarely works out, I think somebody in this price range is likely not going to be uncomfortable with the state of the property. Now, the interior of the property looked great, but the exterior still needed to be done. Sod wasn't in, the pool wasn't finished. There's just some things, right? So this individual came with my realtor. I'm sorry, another realtor came with my realtor, did a little video, showed the individual. And then that individual flew here, looked at the property, and ultimately made an offer on the property. So that's how it unfolded. But so there's a couple of things to consider. Most people that would buy something like this, and I would say that my family was very, very interested in living in this property. It's an absolutely beautiful property. You've seen the property. Mm. The way I look at assets, though, is the lost opportunity on those assets as I carry them. So I think even though I had a very, very low interest rate mortgage on this property, I had put some money into the property, and I see all that money that you put into an asset as lost opportunity. So when I factor the carrying cost on the property or the cost of the property to keep it, I'm not only factoring in what are my taxes, what are my insurance, what's my mortgage payment, I'm also factoring in what am I losing on the equity that I have in the property, because if I could apply that equity somewhere else, I could earn income on that equity. So I made the argument that this property, holding this property or keeping this property for my family, which a lot of people would make that same argument, would likely cost me about $75,000 to $80,000 a month if the property is worth what I think it's worth. And if it goes higher than that, it could cost me $90,000 or $100,000 a month. So as I made the argument to get rid of the asset to my family, I said, if you showed up at this asset and you wanted to live here, if somebody said the rent is $90,000 a month for this house, would you want to rent it? And of course, the answer was no. I don't know if a lot of people look at assets that way, especially assets where they're living as their primary residence or they want to live as their primary residence.
So let's run through the math
Yeah.
specifically. So you paid $1.1 million for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you carried it for about 6 years.
Correct.
What do you estimate the cost of the carry?
That's a good question because we'd have to outline that. So let's call it $1 million for a carry.
Yeah.
I had a 3% mortgage on it.
Yeah, it's probably not $1 million, but maybe it's less.
It's probably less, but
It's
if I'm
Let's call it 900,000 because it's easy math.
If I'm calculating the opportunity on it, that's what I'm calculating as the carry.
Let's-
If we're talking the real carry, it's far less.
Let's use 900,000 because it's easy math in my head. So
Yep.
you pay $1,000,001, you got 8 years of carry. No, 6 years of carry. You spent what to renovate it?
About 2 to 2.5 million.
Okay, let's use 2.25.
Okay,
So you're now at 4.25. You're in, all in.
all in. Yep.
All right. Here's the drum roll. What'd you sell it for?
Well, this particular asset sold for a higher contract price than any other list price in all of Jacksonville. So we have had a history of developing assets, renovating assets, and creating the highest value in the neighborhood. So for the last 10, 20 years, as we've done projects, we've generally sold them for the highest per square foot price of any home in the neighborhood. In this case, it's a higher price than any home in any neighborhood, which I think was a pretty big win. on
Yeah,
this.
no, that's saving oceanfront homes,
Well,
right?
it's all of Jacksonville, so it's not including the.
Oh, you don't include the
yeah.
beaches.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you were to go and just run the numbers on just Jacksonville, Florida, it would be the highest contracted price. The only two properties that are listed at a higher price than a contract price are over 40 acres. So it's really land and not homes. So it sold for $7,050,000.
Okay, congratulations.
Thank you.
All right, so your basis was a little over 4,
Yeah.
and you sold it for 7. Not bad.
It's not too bad. Yeah.
Not bad. It's an okay.
Yeah, 2.5
But
million.
you had to have the guts to do it. You had to have the staying power to do it.
For sure.
You had to have the ability to navigate the renovation, which was pretty substantial,
Yeah.
and you had to know what you're doing.
Right.
But at the end of the day, you produced a great product. And for those that are listening to this podcast, I'll share with you all. When I became partners with Alex, we bought 7 condominium units in a foreclosed building. Is that right?
Yeah, we did.
And you ended up, I thought you were crazy, but you took 2 units and made the largest condo in downtown Orlando.
I had forgotten about that, but yes, I did.
And you then also executed and sold that at the highest price.
I did. Yes.
So perhaps you have a history and a knack for seeing what rich people want.
Yeah, and I think there's a couple lessons here. One is when you look at an asset, you have to calculate the cost of that asset, not just including your cash flow, but including the opportunity that you have in that asset, any of the equity you have buried in that.
Yeah.
And the smaller the asset, the lower the value of the asset, the less buried equity that you have in that asset. As the assets grow and grow, so if you had a $7 million property versus a $200,000 property, the opportunity in the $7 million property is much higher. And so I think our listeners, if they start to think about the lost opportunity on the equity they have in things, that where they're not able to get leverage, which is another part of the equation, I think it becomes pretty impactful for people.
Yeah, and really what we're saying is that you couldn't rent this priced property and make it economically work. The only way to create an investment that produces its highest and best return is to sell it.
Correct, and we're seeing that all over the place in real estate right now, right? So with current values, I was just talking to an individual, one of our listeners, right? And this individual was talking about buying duplexes, and I was trying to explain to him with today's interest rates, with the increases in taxes, with the increases in insurance, he's got to be very, very careful to get that asset at the right cost so that it makes money for him, because he can put his cash in a money market account and earn 4 or 5% on that cash. So if he's not earning 4 or 5% in real estate, there's a much easier way to earn 4 or 5%.
Yeah, and that's why we teach, when we're teaching wealth creation, that the amount of cash you have in your primary home that sits dormant, that doesn't help you, is not great.
Correct.
Okay.
So an equity line of credit would be great to tap into that. But as the asset goes larger, you're impaired on that equity line. You could only go to a certain value of the asset. So
Yeah, and house poor. We talk about being house poor.
yeah,
right?
that's no fun.
That's no fun. And
$90,000 a month will do that to you.
yeah, so let's, for our listeners, let's explain that the substantial, the millions of dollars that you had sitting, earning you nothing,
Right. Was how I came up with the cost.
is the lost opportunity
Right.
cost. So if you think about, for those listening, if you think about $5 million, it was more. I mean, you sold it for $7 million, but if you all just take $5 million using a round number, let's just use a 10% return. That's $500,000 a year of lost opportunity.
It's a lot of money to spend on your house.
That is a lot of money. Yeah. So that's where Alex is getting that. And, that's why we give advice. You can leverage assets to build more income and more assets. And, I commend Alex. Ego would normally have most people saying, we're going to live here in this great place, but you're still a young guy. Even though you've a substantial net worth, you're still being smart about how you leverage and use assets, and not a lot of people would do that. They would say, you know what,
You're right.
I'm going to let all this equity sit here
Yeah.
and earn me nothing. In fact, I'll pay a $15,000 a month tax bill and
Yeah. Right.
and be stupid, and $1,000 a month insurance bill. And we talk about this all the time, that I've lived in the same house for 30 years, and
It's amazing.
A lot of people ask why I live in this little house, and there's a reason for it.
Right.
So
It's smart.
well, first of all, congratulations. I think we can all say we're jealous, envious of Alex for this. And no, I'm just kidding. I'm happy for him. And any other words of wisdom? Any advice? On this asset, that what would be the top 2 or 3 lessons from it that you can share?
I think the first lesson we talked about was just evaluating your assets and determining if they should be sold, how to maximize the value of that asset, right? So that's the first thing. And I think the next thing for me would be, and you come up with a lesson too. It's if you have a skill, you can utilize that skill to grow your value, right? Your net worth. And I have a skill in design and renovation, and I've honed that skill over many, many years, and I'll continue to leverage that skill that I learned a long time ago to continue to create value. And that's value for me and value for a lot of other people.
So you're in your late 40s. Yes, I just said that publicly. But at what point do you say, you know what, I'm going to just live with the big asset with all this equity tied up? Is that ever going to happen?
I don't know that I have it in me. I don't know that I have it in me.
Okay.
I really don't. I just see it as so wasteful, right? So if you take that money and apply it and then just give all that money away, like I don't need that money buried sitting in there. Just help you could save 25 lives a month. In this case, I think I quantified about 75 people a month. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know that I'll ever be that way.
Okay. Well, that's pretty good. I think Warren Buffett's kind of the same way. Doesn't he live in a pretty modest house?
He's way worse than me with that stuff.
Yeah, that's good. Maybe that's the lesson here for
Yeah.
our listeners and viewers. All right. Any other final words before we let everybody go? Thanks for sharing this personal story. I had asked Alex to share this story because I watched him buy it. I remember the decision making, and here's a good happy ending.
Yes, it is. Absolutely.
So congratulations. With that, well, thanks for being with us in this episode of From Worry to Wealth, and we will see you in the next episode.